Wano is not only the longest arc in One Piece history spanning 148 chapters, but it's also the most controversial as it completely divided the community. I have friends that think it's one of the best arcs ever, while others think it did not live up to expectations. It does have a lot of great plot twists and revelations, but it also has a lot of bad ones. Some of the best fights in the entire series, but also some of the worst. I understand why it was completely divisive, but regardless of how you feel about it, it's definitely one of the most impactful arcs in the entire series, changing it forever. It was a long arc, so obviously people aren't going to remember everything that happened. So today I'd like to recap the entirety of Wano and explain why it is one of the most important arcs in the entirety of One Piece. So we'll actually start things from 41 years ago during Oden's flashback. The reason being so we actually understand why everything is happening, as well as understand character motivations and moments that will happen in the future of the arc that necessarily didn't land because we did not understand perspective or context. Kozuki Oden was a living legend, living the life that many people would desire. He had everything in the palm of his hands, from women, power, and even money, but the one thing he never was able to get was freedom, as he always desired to travel outside of Wano because he felt it was too cramped, and for all his life he would always try and attempt to escape it. Despite being one of the strongest swordsmen and characters in the entire series, he was never good at navigation and was never able to escape until an unfateful event happened in the Flower Capital, which began the journey and legend of Oden. When Kinemon decided to steal a baby boar and caused a mountain god giant boar to invade the capital and destroy everything, where Oden took it upon himself to defeat it in one slash and took the blame for himself, and thus was completely evicted out of the Flower Capital and became an outsider. And because of this legendary performance, Denjiro and Kinemon became his first followers, and over the years he would continue to gain a legend and following of himself. But first he'd make a pit stop to Shimotsuki Yasue, who was a very important figure in Oden's life, who was a mentor and would lend him help and money whenever he needed to. But this is also where he met Orochi. Now Orochi is a member of the Kurozumi clan, but they are persecuted because of a mistake his grandfather did many years ago by trying to become shogun and killing all the daimyo, but was caught, and thus his family was forever hunted. But he would one day meet Kurozumi Higurashi, who had Mr. Two's clone fruit back in the day and potentially could have been a member of Rocks, as she was ousted from Wano many years ago, as well as Kurozumi Semimaru, who had Bartolomeo's barrier fruit, and together these guys would create a plot for Orochi to usurp and become shogun and destroy Wano from within and create a weapons factory, and thus they gave him the legendary Orochi Devil Fruit, and thus this was the beginning of his many decade-long plan. But anyways, Oden started to make a name for himself. He would meet his future retainers, Izu and Kiku, Raizo and Kanjuro, and together they were basically like a little family. He adopted these guys that were considered outsiders, and one day he decided to make a nation for himself and attacked Kuri, which was a lawless region controlled by Ashura Doji, and by himself he took out everyone in that capital and forced them into submission and became king. And throughout the years he ended up even becoming daimyo and basically the GOAT. He would eventually meet Inu, Neko, and Kawamatsu, who are going to get executed by the citizens of Wano, and basically these guys would then become his scabbards. But despite all the power, fame, and how much he's helped this region, he was never truly happy because he never got the one thing he truly desired: freedom. Until one fateful day he met the legendary pirate Whitebeard. Stranded on Wano, Whitebeard did not know what to do, but Oden sensed him and comes running like a fat kid who's starving, who just smelled some cake, and they get into a fight. But unfortunately for Oden, he is humbled quickly and realizes that the world is much bigger than him, and Whitebeard is a demon. After finally finding a powerful pirate and a way out, he snuck out of Wano and tried to forcefully join Whitebeard's crew, but Izo was watching him the whole time and tagged along. Whitebeard, impressed, said if he can survive the next 3 days, he let him join. Unfortunately, Oden almost joined but let go because he sensed Lady Toki in danger. Now, Lady Toki is a very important figure. We don't know much about her, but what we do know is she's actually born in the Void Century and has the Devil Fruit of the Time Fruit, which allows her to go into the future. She has been constantly trying to go into the future to not only go back to Wano where she was born, but also to find a fateful day, which we now know is when someone finds the One Piece and the return of Joy Boy. After the selfless act, Whitebeard is impressed and allows both of them to join his crew, where Lady Toki and Oden begin to build a relationship and even had a family, where Hiyori and Momonosuke were born on Whitebeard's legendary ship. Also, Inu and Neko are here the whole time. They stowed away, who really cares? But anyways, after some time, the crew gets a little too big. Whitebeard begins to create his divisions, and thus Oden became the second division commander that Ace would eventually take over many years later. They even meet a young Blackbeard who's begging to join his crew, and this was honestly Whitebeard's worst mistake ever. He should have left that boy on that island. After a few years of sailing as a pirate, he would make a name for himself and even gain a bounty, but one day he would have a fateful encounter that would change his life forever. He tries to attack Roger but gets humbled quick, fast, and in a hurry, and finds out really fast that he's not the guy, he's just a guy. And he witnessed something he's never seen before. Whitebeard comes flying through the air like Michael Jordan in Space Jam, Air Newgate style, and clashes with his legendary rival Roger, and they split the sky, something that Oden has never seen in his life before. The two crews clash for the next 3 days and 3 nights until they get into a treaty and peace is found, but Roger has one request of Whitebeard. He asks that Oden joins his crew. Unfortunately, Whitebeard reluctantly allows him to join after Oden was impressed with Roger's true dream that he reveals to Whitebeard and Oden, the same dream that Luffy has as well. They journey off to find the road poneglyphs in order to find Laugh Tale, and thus they would return to Wano as they had one of these themselves. But unfortunately, coincidentally, Lady Toki ended up getting sick and decided to stay behind with Nekomamushi and Inu. But Oden doesn't even step foot on this land, because if he did, he would get homesick and would truly miss it. But unfortunately for him, had he done that, he probably could have saved his country, because it's far different. There's a lot of pollution, the wildlife is different, and you can see weapon factories built in the back. But he knows that helping Roger is his destiny. The both of them go on some countless adventures, even revisiting areas we've seen previously, such as Water 7, meeting Tom, and even Frankie, a kid version of Frankie, and even asked him to join the crew, which Frankie refuses. Why he never mentioned this before is I don't know. But he also goes to many places such as Skypiea, where we find out that Oden was the one who put the message on the belfry that Roger wanted to put. They would also go to Zou to get another road poneglyph, and he also gets voices in his head similar to Momonosuke and Luffy, as Roger and Oden also have the voice of all things. They also go to Fishman Island, where they basically encounter the same thing because of the Sea Kings, but we also find out that one of the road poneglyphs was there. It's no longer there for whatever reason. The man marked by Flame has it as of right now, and they then locate Laugh Tale and proceed to go there. Unfortunately, Shanks and Buggy are not able to go because coincidentally, Buggy ends up getting sick, which Shanks decides to stay behind, promising that one day both of these guys will end up going, and the way things are looking with all of these guys as emperors, that might actually come true. After finally reaching the island, they lay eyes on the One Piece and learn the truth about the world, the Void Century, the ancient weapons, even the Will of D. But regardless of everything, even when the world government are trying to hide this, their first reaction was to laugh. The story left behind was so funny to the crew and Roger that he decided to name the island after it, and thus calling it Laugh Tale. But unfortunately, the crew got here a little too early, 20 years too early to be specific, and this might be because of Shirahoshi. They go back to Fishman Island and find out that Shirahoshi is not born yet, and she'll be raised as an adult 20 years from now. Now, it's most likely the reason they're too early is because Poseidon is needed to accomplish whatever goal the ancient kingdom had. But regardless, the Roger Pirates would then disband and Oden would return to Wano, where it's not exactly the place that he left behind. The land is in turmoil and Orochi is now the shogun after quote unquote poisoning Sukiyaki, Oden's father, and he quote-unquote died, and thus Orochi would have Higurashi clone herself into him and declare Orochi as the Shogun. As we all know by now, he never died, he went into hiding, he's Tenguyama the whole time, there you go. But obviously no one was about this and they rebelled against Orochi, but they were quickly defeated, and even Lady Toki was injured, and this enraged Oden, and he goes storming into the capital like a Karen that got her order wrong, and he tries to attack Orochi but was stopped by Semimaru's barrier technique, and thus comes down the future emperor Kaido. The real reason Orochi is actually in power, and these guys battle, and eventually everyone thought things were going to be well because Oden's back, but that was not the case. He comes out a different man. For the next 5 years, every single day, he's dancing on the street in just a loincloth, acting a fool. Everyone is confused, even his loyal servants. No one understands why this is happening, and he loses faith of everyone. Little did they know, the reason he did this is because he made a deal with them, promising that hostages will be freed from Kaido, and eventually Orochi and Kaido would leave in 5 years. But little did he know, he was tricked.
We have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok, and flat out deceived.
By the way, as this was happening, Gekko Maria and his crew went to Wano, and their cheeks were clapped by Kaido, but he was leaving with something and he stole the Shisui. And the last straw was when Hyogoro's wife is killed, and thus he leads his scabbards into a battle against the future emperor. And this is the first time in Kaido's life that he finally met his match. He is having a battle of his life against Oden to the point he almost dies. As Oden is about to do the killing blow, he's distracted as Higurashi clones herself as Momonosuke, and he's distracted, and in that little moment he is clobbered in the back of his head, leaving a boo-boo on him, and he is soundly defeated. This completely outrages Kaido because he's never had a battle like this, and as we all know, he wishes to have an honorable death and he loves to fight, and it was ruined, so thus he kills Higurashi. Now the execution for Oden is set, and they plan to boil him and his retainers alive, but he makes one final plea. If he can survive the boiling pot for 1 hour, they'll let him and his scabbards free, which obviously he knew was not going to happen, but they do it anyways, and he actually survives the 1 hour. What an absolute legend and Chad. Obviously, Orochi and Kaido were never gonna let this happen, and so he throws the scabbards and lets them escape, and in his final moments, he is killed by Kaido. Inu and Neku are having an argument the whole time, blaming each other for what happened, but then they're attacked by King, and this what started their 20-year-long feud. Kinemon, Kanjuro, Kiku, and Raizo make it to the castle, where Lady Toki sends them 20 years into the future alongside Momo, hoping that they can save the Wano country, while Kawamatsu takes Hiyori and protects her, and she throws Oden's journal into the water, where he basically was writing his entire journey the entire time. Toki then decides to go to the capital to deliver a Martin Luther King speech, and she is killed, all because she couldn't live a life without Oden, and she did not want to raise her kids. Men are not the only deadbeats around here. I joke. But this guy Denjiro, oh my god, he got so angry after the situation that his literal face structure changed, and he basically became a new person, becoming a Yakuza boss working under Orochi under the name Kyoshiro. He was basically a pimp at this point, and Hiyori, leaving Kawamatsu after a while, ended up going to Denjiro not knowing who he was, and basically together they were a team, and he basically raised her ever since and became Komurasaki, basically being the #1 hoe in all of Wano. I know Oden was rolling in his grave. Denjiro, how could you? And thus ends the legend of Oden and Toki. But their legacy lives on, and they inspired many people, one of whom is Kaido's daughter, son daughter. She is a girl, but she wanted to identify as a male because she's so inspired by Oden after the boiling that she wanted to become him and fought against Kaido to free Wano, but to no avail because she's just a child. This is equivalent to like 50 Cent's son taking a picture of Ja Rule. I understand why Kaido beat the brakes off of her. And he throws her into a cave to teach her a lesson where he learns that she has Conqueror Haki. And he's like, wow, I'm very impressed. Hopefully you can survive, deuces. And she is trapped in a cave with the 3 daimyo that decided to rebel against Kaido and Orochi, one of whom is called Shimosuke Ushimaru. Quickly, this guy I want to explain because it's never said in the story, but in an SBS, this guy is Zoro's great uncle. The reason he looks like him and has the same fighting style is because they're a part of the same family. A little backtracking here, 50 years prior to the story, an expedition left Wano and went to the East Blue where they protected a village and formed Shimotsuki Village. Ushimaru's sister met a man named Roronoa Pin Zoro, and they would have a child named Roronoa Arashi, who met a girl named Terra, and they would then have a child named Zoro. Unfortunately, these guys were killed by pirates, and thus that is the origin of Zoro. And also Kozaburo was a part of this expedition. He is the guy that created the Enma as well as the Wado Ichimonji. He knew Zoro and taught him a few things. But anyways, Yamato finds Oden's journal, but unfortunately she cannot read and has the daimyo help her out, and thus they find out Oden's journey. These three decide to go out fighting and leave the cave and decide to fight Kaido, where they die. We fast forward to 18 years later where Ace visits Wano. He meets Otama, who actually is also a Kurozumi that's never mentioned in the story but in an SBS, and their parents were killed because they were hunted because of the Kurozumi persecution. Kind of crazy, but anyways, he promises that he'll come back when she's a kunoichi and bring her on his crew. He's lying, and then he goes off to fight Kaido, but he's not there, and he sees Yamato, and these guys fight, but they end up becoming friends, where he promises one day he'll return to defeat Kaido and allow her to join his crew. He's lying once again. Ace is a liar, and unfortunately, as we all know, he ended up dying. But thus this sets up the stage to right now, where Luffy and his crew finally fulfill the legacy of Oden and all those before him. So now the Straw Hats are in Wano, and Zoro's already causing trouble, becoming a wanted man. Luffy and the whole cake half of the crew make it to Wano, and in typical One Piece fashion, they split up. Luffy ends up fighting some beast pirates where he meets Otama, who uses her devil fruit power, the dongle, that takes control of these monsters. Now this ability will become very important later on, but unfortunately she falls ill. But also Luffy reveals Ace died 2 years ago, and because Wano doesn't get outside information, this is a huge shock, and they have to go to Okobore town to find some help. And they also meet Tenguyama, who's been taking care of Otama ever since Drake destroyed her village, and we're introduced to the Nida Kitetsu, a plotline that leads to absolutely nowhere, where we finally get Luffy reuniting with Zoro. It's been such a long time since these two met, but it's short-lived when Hawkins interrupts, as he turns out to be a part of the Beast Pirate after Kaido crashed their meeting, with Apu being revealed to be always a part of the Beast Pirates, where Kid stood up to him but was absolutely clapped and sent to prison. They have a little scuffle. It's cute, I guess, but Luffy and Zoro end up escaping, where they go to Okobore town, where they meet Suru, Kinemon's wife, as well as Kiku, one of the samurai sent to the future. Some shenanigans happen. They beat up some scrubs. Tama finds herself a new guardian named Speed, using the power of the dongle. She is half horse, half woman. I do not know why anyone would sign up to be a beast pirate and eat these atrocities, but here we are. They end up reuniting with Law, who is fighting the Scrub Lord Hawkins, and they end up going to Oden Castle, where the story of the samurai and how this all started was explained to them, and they meet up with Kinemon, as well as the Hokage crew, where they explain the plan to raid Onigashima during the Fire Festival. As this is happening, Ashura Doji ends up going to Okobore town, but he's not alone, as Jack the Jobber is there as well, and he does what he does best, and jobs getting clowned on by Ashura Doji. But unfortunately for Doji, a very important figure ends up appearing, and it's Kaido. For the first time in this dragon form, descends down on Okobore town, trying to find where Law and Luffy are. Hawkins makes up a whole lie that ends up not being a lie and points it over to Oden Castle, where he blows it up, and Luffy and Law are enraged. Well, more so Luffy, and Law just follows to make sure he doesn't do anything stupid, which he does by punching Kaido in the head, thinking his crew has just died. Luckily for them, they weren't, as Shinobu, loyal retainer of Oden, helped them and dug a hole underneath them by using her ripe fruit. And thus the battle between Kaido and Luffy begins. And Luffy is not ready for the ass whooping he's about to receive. Luffy gives it his all and is beating Kaido down for about 30 minutes. He's using everything he has. This is the same Luffy that split a city in half fighting Doflamingo, the same one that fought Katakuri for 11 plus hours, but none of his attacks matter as Kaido gets up virtually with no damage, sighs, and not only speed blitz him, but knocks him out in one hit. Luffy is defeated, and it was wild. He then throws him into prison where he becomes a cellmate with Captain Useless Mid, and thus ending Act 1. So some time has passed, Kid and Luffy are now in Udon prison where a little rivalry starts brewing between the two, but they also meet Hyogoro, the mafia boss whose wife was killed by Kaido and Orochi, and he's been in prison ever since. They decide to save him, and him and Luffy decide to form a little relationship where he ends up becoming Luffy's mentor, which is pretty awesome. We're also reintroduced to Caribou, who was thrown in Udon prison after his cover story when he was defeated by X-Drake for taking part in a revolution because he looked like this old lady's grandson. Whatever, but we start learning more about what happened to Kid in the last 2 years. The reason he lost his arm is because he got into a battle with the red-haired pirates, but as we learn in the future, it wasn't from Shanks himself, but most likely from Ben Beckman. But the world thinks he lost it when he invaded Big Mom's territory and was humiliated, but the truth is he went there, stole something, most likely wrote poneglyph rubbing, I guess, and he left and scarred one of the Sweet Commanders, who most likely is Snacks. Zoro meets and becomes friends with Yasue. We learn that he is the father of Otoko, but not by blood. He adopted her after she ate a small fruit that forced her to laugh and smile, and so in return he ate one himself so she wouldn't feel alone. This was revealed in an SPS. We're then introduced to Wano's number one whore, Komurasaki, aka Hiyori, because Denjiro told her that these bills aren't gonna pay themselves, baby, you gotta hit the streets. So she's about to attend Orochi's little party alongside Otoko, who's actually her little assistant, but she won't be alone as Nami and Robin are infiltrating in disguise to get some more information. This party is a mess. Orochi sussing the vibes with his paranoia. Otoko laughs by accident because of her smile fruit, and he's about to lash out before Komurasaki slaps him, and before he's about to attack her with his devil fruit that he's completely wasting, her pimp Kyoshiro steps in and kills her. This shocks everyone. The party breaks down. Nami and Robin are found out because they infiltrated, they save Otoko, and they escape. We're also introduced to Kaido's left and right hand man, King with a bounty of 1,390,000,000 and Queen with a bounty of 1,320,000,000. They're chewing up Jack because he's trash, but they're interrupted when someone decides to pay a visit to Wano to ruin yet another arc. I kid, kind of, sort of. Big Mom and her crew decide to visit Wano to get revenge on Luffy and also get back Zeus that was stolen by Nami, but unfortunately for her and her crew, as they're entering Wano, their ship is kicked off the waterfall by King in his pterodon form, and they fall, where Big Mom is separated by her crew and gets amnesia. This is one of those plots that were unnecessary and kind of dumb. It was just Oda's way of getting Big Mom from point A to B, but had her go through C, D, E, and F, and we are forced to witness her amnesia where she becomes Oden, where she meets Otama, Chopper, and Momonosuke, and they pretend to be her friend, and they head over to Udon prison to try to save Luffy. Now this is where things start to pick up a bit, because Sanji is paid a visit by Page one of the Toby Roppo, a group that honestly kind of stinks, but we'll get to them later. He decides to fight Sanji because he heard that he's causing trouble, and we're introduced to the raid suit, the same suits that his brother and sister was using, which was pretty awesome. It gives him the ability to have basically more durability, extra speed, as well as turn invisible. This thing is awesome, and he uses it for the first time, basically beating the dog shit out of Page One. We don't get to see the full fight, but it's pretty fun for while it lasts. Now this is where things get even more lit. Some time passes and Zoro's sword Shisui is stolen by a man named Yuki Orochimaru. As you remember, Shisui is a national treasure of this country but was stolen 20 plus years ago by Gekko Moria. These two get into a little squabble, but as this is happening, an assassin named Kamazo enters the fray as he's chasing, you guessed it, Wano's #1 whore, Komurasaki and Otoko. Zoro then fights Kamazo. The short is pretty short, but it's really fun and animated perfectly, where he actually uses his muscles to trap the scythe and uses it for Santoryu and defeats Kamazo. It was really dope, really fun, but he passes out where Hiyori takes care of him and then reveals her true identity to him. We head back to Udon Prison where Queen decides to visit because this is his territory and forces Luffy and Hyogoro to fight for their lives by putting exploding sea stone cuffs around their neck, the same one that Kami had in Shibodi. They start fighting for their lives and Luffy decides to use this as training as he needs to find a way to bypass Kaido's defense and scales, where Hyogoro begins to teach Luffy the way of Ryo. This is Wano's way of calling it Haki, similar to how Mantra was Haki in Skypiea. But their Haki is a lot more advanced than regular, where they're able to hit people without making contact while also damaging from the inside, and this is the key that Luffy needs in order to defeat Kaido. Kid actually escapes Udon Prison, while Raizo is actually here planning to save Luffy, but they also find out that Kawamatsu is locked up here as well. We proceed to the following day where we're getting a Thought's funeral as well as Yasue's execution as he was caught by Orochi's men, because the plan was starting to crumble and fall apart because it was getting leaked due to a traitor amongst the group. And now the Straw Hats decide to head over to Yasue to help him out. Yasue then gives a speech on how Orochi's a two-pack of ass and takes the blame for himself, that he was the one that sent out the message and it was just an elaborate prank. Also, the plan wouldn't get ruined. What a legend, but unfortunately Orochi decides to execute him. Shit starts popping off and the Straw Hats are fighting everybody, but they manage to escape with Otoko. While this is happening, everyone in Udon is watching this, where Kid comes back after he was recaptured. Not because he was defeated, but basically he got himself captured after witnessing his friend being sent to Udon Prison, and this friend is Kamazo, who is actually Killer the entire time, who was forced to eat a defective smile fruit. Now he's always laughing and smiling, something that he absolutely hates, which is why he covered his face and doesn't laugh anymore. And he wanted to do this in order to save Kid, and obviously this was never going to happen because of his defeat, was sent to Udon Prison, and now both of these guys are set to be executed by Queen. Right here, I would like to insert something that was not originally in the series, but was revealed in an SBS, and that is Kid's flashback. I think this would have been the perfect time to reveal this because it was such an important moment for Kid that he was at his lowest, and his friend was also basically broken. So it all started many years ago in the South Blue, where Kid and Killer and his friends were on this island that was governed by these gangsters, by mafias, and each of them was reigned by different people. Kid, Killer, Heat, and Wire all ruled in their respective quadrants, where Kid and Killer fell in love with a girl named Victoria. This girl was killed by one of the main gang leaders, and they got so angry they took them out and took over the country, where they then decided to become pirates and named their ship after her, the Victoria Punk. It's a really sweet backstory, and is a much needed for Kid, because honestly sometimes all you really need is a flashback to understand the character and for people to end up liking them a lot more, because unfortunately for Kid, things don't get any better for him during this arc. Anyways, Big Mom rushes into Udon Prison, well, Olin, and chaos starts ensuing. Luffy sees this, he's shocked, and he doesn't know what to do, and then Hyogoro tells him, try using Ryo on her. It doesn't work, he's smacked into a wall. He goes around destroying everything for whatever reason, looking for Oshiruko, where Queen's like, enough is enough. He jumps off the top rope and does a diving headbutt like he's Chris Benoit and lands on her head. She regains her memories, but unfortunately is knocked out. Queen then takes her to Onigashima and they hightail out of there. This whole moment was basically just to get Queen out of this situation, as well as Big Mom, and free Luffy and everyone. That's all it really was, and just to get her to meet with Kaido. As this is happening, Luffy then uses his new Ryo and destroys the collar on his neck, the same way that Rayleigh did with Cammy, so we now know what Rayleigh did after all of these years. Luffy then makes a ruckus, defeats everyone, and forces Momonosuke to reveal himself, and he is now here to save Wano. Kawamatsu is saved. Honestly, when it comes to Kawamatsu, it doesn't get any better than this. He goes off to look for Yukimaru and weapons for everyone. We learn that he took care of Onimaru as well as Hiyori. They reunite, and then Hiyori decides to give Zoro a new sword, the Enma. This once belonged to Oden, but as I mentioned earlier, this actually makes sense because the Wado Ichimonji and the Enma were both made by Kozoburo, so basically these swords are sister swords, and it was always destined to belong to Zoro, I guess, and now he's forced to not only take up the mantle of Oden, but surpass him. It's even said that Zoro could level up this sword and turn it into a supreme grade blade if he turns it into a black blade similar to Yoru and Shusui, and thus everyone begins to train, and Luffy's learning Ryo, Zoro's learning how to control Enma. Also, while this is happening, Law fought Hawkins to save his crew. He gets captured, he beats up Hawkins off screen, and he's freed by X-Drake. Who really cares? We then head over to Onigashima, where Kaido and Big Mom reunite for the first time in decades since the God's Valley incident, I believe. I would also like to interject Kaido's flashback at this point so we can have an understanding as why he is the way he is, as well as his relationship with Linlin. And I think we can all agree his flashback is too little, too late, as I believe it would have been better to get his flashback earlier in the arc so we not only understand his motivations, but so there isn't as much hype and anticipation only for people to be disappointed. Now it all starts 46 years ago at the age of 10, where Kaido is already a monster and the strongest in the Vodka Kingdom, but he's unfortunately sold off to the Marines in order for this country to join the world government and be invited to the Reverie. Kaido does not like this as he was betrayed and doesn't understand why the Celestial Dragons hold so much power over the world, and he does not want to be a political pawn. This is where his trust issues, as well as his philosophy of Darwinism, only the strong should survive and rule, is born. Over the next 2 years, he's captured a few times by the Marines only so he can get fed because he's a broke boy. 2 years later, he joins the Rocks Pirates, where he serves them for about 6 years alongside Shiki, Big Mom, Whitebeard, Captain John Ochoku, and others, where they terrorize the seas, but unfortunately they disband at God's Valley incident, which was skipped over. It sucks because I think this is where majority of his character growth and development comes from, but this is also where Big Mom finds his devil fruit and gives it to him, which is why he owes her a lifetime debt. At some point, he's captured and is sent to Punk Hazard, where he meets King, he frees him, and they form the Beast Pirates. And at this point, King kind of believes that Kaido is meant to be Joy Boy, but at some point, it turns out that Kaido and King realize that's not the case, and this is where I think Kaido's mindset changes, where he realizes he's not the man meant to change the world, so if he can't change it, he might as well destroy it and wait for the day that Joy Boy eventually returns. How he learns about Joy Boy, I'm not sure. Maybe he learned from Oden's journal, or maybe even King himself, but he eventually just awaits for the eventual arrival of Joy Boy, and thus ends Kaido's flashback when he meets Higurashi and she leads him to Wano, and we are where we are now. A few days pass by, and then Kaido and Big Mom decide to stop their fighting, but instead make an alliance that no one is ready for, and thus we head into Act 3, where it's the Straw Hats and their alliance versus the two emperors. We then head into Act 3, where we get some updates on the outside world. I go through all of that in my Egghead video, so go check that out. But X-Drake calls Kobe, and it's revealed that he's actually not a pirate, but in fact an op. He is a Marine the whole time, to no one's surprise. But in fact, he is actually the leader of SWORD, a subdivision of Marines that basically resigned because they do not agree with the philosophy of the Marine Corps and don't take any accountability or responsibility for their actions, but they still have to take orders. They're basically Marines by name. Drake accomplishes nothing, so I'd rather not talk about him. But we head over to Tokage Port, where the Scabbards meet up, and unfortunately their entire plan is in shambles. All the ships are destroyed, no one is there to meet up with them, and so they decide to go to Onigashima themselves, where it's revealed that the entire plan was leaked from the very beginning, as Kondro actually was working with Orochi the entire time, sending him messages, letting him know everything that's been going on the entire time, and he's actually been on Orochi's side since the very beginning, as Kanjuro is actually a Kurozumi and he wishes to take revenge. Momo is then kidnapped by Kanjuro, but he shows a little bit of courage trying to put off a brave act, and this is the start of Momo's great character development, what it means to be a man and a true leader. But unfortunately for Kanjuro, basically everyone overheard his plan, as Denjiro, being revealed to be Kyoshiro, comes in and cuts down the ship to help the Scabbards and reunite with them after all these years. But also the Straw Hats Kid and Law decide to join up as well, and they take down a couple of ships, where none other than Jinbei finally joins the crew after all of these years. It was such a great moment to have Jinbei finally join the crew and become a part of them after almost a decade plus. So this was a really good moment and official way for him to join, and they were going to celebrate, but they cut it short waiting for the end of the arc, and they finally make it to Onigashima. But they're not the only ones heading to Onigashima, as the Big Mom Pirates once again sail up the waterfall, but once again are kicked off by none other than Marco the Phoenix, who's there alongside Izo and Neko Momushi, fulfilling the wishes of Oden and even Ace to save Wano and help Monkey D. Luffy. Unfortunately though, we never see the Big Mom Pirates again. They are quite literally here to drop Big Mom off at Wano. It's so sad, but it is what it is. These guys stink. Well, at least most of them, except for Perospero, as he actually survived and is heading over to Onigashima, where he meets up with Marco and they make a little deal to head over to Onigashima where he can reunite with Big Mom. We all know pirates, this wasn't going to last long. The enemy is gathering on Onigashima for the Fire Festival. CP0 is there, as they're now the middleman because Dofi's out of the picture. The numbers have arrived. They are experiments from the world government to recreate the ancient giants, which are basically Orz's race. These guys are a two-pack of ass and accomplish nothing, and they're led by Apu. But also, we're finally introduced to the Tobi Roppo. This group is okay. There's some really cool members. We have Who's Who with a bounty of 546 million, Black Maria a bounty of 480 million, Sasaki with a bounty of 472 million, Ulti with a bounty of 400 million, Page 1 with a bounty of 290 million, and Drake, who has not even gotten a new bounty. This guy is ass.
Hear me and hear me good, nigga. I'm here to double down. That shit is a two-pack of ass.
They are now tasked to go find Yamato, Kaido's son, in order to fight one of the calamities to become a commander in Kaido's crew. So the Straw Hats infiltrate Onigashima, and in typical One Piece fashion, Luffy screws up the entire plan the first 5 minutes, and everybody starts brawling. Kid, Killer, Luffy, and Zoro are fighting everyone. They bump into Apu, and he goes attacking and does the best thing he's ever done in his entire life and knocks out Luffy for just a few seconds because of his Devil Fruit, which allows him to attack people through music, and they cannot block it unless they cover their ears, which they figure out due to Killer. And Kid finally takes his revenge on Apu for betraying them a couple months ago because of Kaido. Meanwhile, Sanji sees Granny Coochie when he accidentally sees Big Mom changing, and this shatters his mind. She then sees Chopper and Usopp and begins chasing them. Afterwards, Luffy bumps into Page 1 and Ulti, and they begin brawling. Ulti is by far the most impressive Tobi Roppo, in my opinion, where even Luffy needed Gear 4th to take her down because she was that strong, but it didn't need to get to that point because Yamato comes in and knocks Ulti out in just one hit, saving Luffy, revealing that she's been waiting for him the entire time because she knew Ace and wishes to join Luffy's crew and leave Wano.
You don't mean that shit. You just running your mouth like you always do. You don't even mean that shit.
They become acquainted with one another, but time is cut short when it's revealed that Momonosuke is about to be executed by Kaido and Orochi. But Luffy doesn't want to initiate the battle because it's not his battle, it's the Scabbards, so they're the ones who must start. Meanwhile, the rest of the Scabbards finally fully reunite, where Kiku and Izu finally see each other after decades. But it's interrupted when Kanjuro comes in, but is quickly defeated by Kiku and is killed for the first time. But anywho, things get rowdy on the live floor when Big Mom makes an appearance. Her and Kaido announce they're gonna claim the One Piece, get the ancient weapons, rule the world, and turn Wano into new Onigashima, where Yamato will become the next shogun. This pisses Orochi off and he starts mouthing off as if he's somebody until Kaido kills Orochi and takes off his head. But as you soon find out, like a roach, you just can't get rid of Orochi. This was such a great moment and a good way for Kaido to finally become center stage and the major antagonist of the arc, because let's be honest, Orochi is a 2-pack of ass. As they're about to execute Momonosuke, Kaido starts thinking to himself, how could such a coward be Oden's son? That doesn't make any sense to him, and he starts reminiscing to 20 years ago when he was interested in him but was disappointed and asked what is his name, but Momo was too scared, but things are a little different now. He asked what is Momo's name in front of everyone before killing him, and even gives him a way out. If you claim that you're not Oden's son, I'll leave you alone, man. Like, whatever, you're not a threat to me. But Momo gets some balls of steel and announces that he is Kozuki Momonosuke, Oden's son, and the next Shogun of Wano. But shit starts popping off. The scabbards ambush Kaido. He gets PTSD of Oden and remembers him, which shows just how much respect and even fear he had of the man. It's crazy that Oden really put the fear of God into Kaido 20 plus years later. But the Straw Hats make it to the live floor. They start going crazy. X-Drake is found as a spy and he escapes, teaming up with Luffy, and they take down a number. Drake is garbage. To the 10 fans out there, like, is this your king? This guy does nothing the whole arc. He fights Appu for 80% of the arc, gets clapped by CP0, stabs one of them, which does absolutely nothing. This guy is absolute garbage, but regardless, the war has officially begun. Sanji then saves Momo using the raid suit by turning invisible, but is caught by King. They get into a little scuffle, but Sanji comes out unharmed due to the durability of the raid suit, which is actually a pretty crazy feat. Meanwhile, Big Mom is terrorized by the Straw Hat Pirates, getting a motorcycle in her face by Frankie, who declares Luffy will become the next Pirate King. I will never get tired of the Straw Hats declaring Luffy to become the Pirate King. It's like listening to a playlist that you made, it hits every time. But anyways, Jinbei and Robin basically throw Big Mom out of Onigashima to the entrance, where she bumps into Perospero and Marco, where, you guessed it, they betray Marco and almost kill him until Carrot and Wanda step in and attack Perospero to get revenge for Pedro, despite he killing himself and not Perospero the one doing it, but that's just semantics. Anyways, Big Mom heads up to the rooftop to meet with Kaido, who is currently fighting with the Scabbards. Well, actually watching Jack get beat up by the Minks as they finally get the revenge under a bright moonlight. They turn into the Sulong farm and basically annihilate Jack. It's not really a fight, it's basically a beatdown. It's like a mom spanking their kid for doing bad in school. We then get the 9 Scrubs versus Kaido, and they're doing pretty good for themselves, even having his 4 best disciples copy his technique, the Totsuka Paradise, hitting Kaido on his scar. Now, the only reason he felt pain was because he was getting PTSD from his fight with Oden, and in fact, this wasn't really hurting him, it felt more like a scratch. Claiming he would like to die, but he just can't allow himself to do so against these Scrubs. He begins to bust their head to the white meat, beating them to an inch of their life as if he saw them buying a PS5 with the money they owed him, and thus they are soundly defeated. We head back to the live floor where there's a bunch of shenanigans going on. Appu gets the best moment of his life where he gets cut down by Zoro. Chopper proves why he's the best doctor in the world, and Hyogoro should have died, but he didn't, and everyone tries to proceed to go to the roof. Meanwhile, Yamato and Momonosuke finally meet as she protects him and promises to do so for the remainder of the arc and becomes his protector, and this relationship is very important as it helps Momonosuke grow as a person. Afterwards, we get probably one of Nami's best moments ever as her and Usopp are getting beaten to an inch of their life. Ulti wants her to say that Luffy will never become Pirate King, which Nami cannot bring herself to do. In fact, she reiterates that Luffy will become the Pirate King. Even after having her skull bashed in, she still has loyalty to Luffy and shows she will always stand with what she believes in. Otama then saves them, and her power becomes very crucial for the battle, as because of it, they're able to turn all of the small users onto their side. Tama and Momo learn that Ace is Luffy's brother and Roger's son, but more importantly, Kaido decides, you know what will make this party even better? If I lift up Onigashima and drop it on top of Wano and name the entire island New Onigashima. So he then proceeds to use the flame clouds of his devil fruit to lift up the entirety of Onigashima and head it straight for Wano. Sanji gets distracted and is then captured by Black Maria, where he then asks Robin for help. This is a great callback to not just Enies Lobby, but the lesson he learned in Whole Cake Island that it's okay to ask for help, which he does in style, and the rest of the Straw Hats fights are finally set in place. Finally makes it to the rooftop alongside Kid, Killer, Zoro, and Law, and we get one of the coldest moments in One Piece history. Luffy walks right past Big Mom and Kaido as if they're nothing, tonks to Kinemon and promises he's gonna save Wano, and begins to hit Kaido square in the face with a red rock, beginning one of the greatest battles in One Piece history, which all of us like to call Roof Piece. And he begins to reminisce about his top 5 of all time: Roger, Whitebeard, Oden, Rocks, and Shanks, and wonders if one day Luffy too can reach his top 5. But regardless, everyone starts throwing hands. Zoro's somehow able to cut fire, but everyone is showing just how much of a monster they truly are, which truly impresses Kaido. We get some amazing character interactions during this fight as well. This really is the best group battle in One Piece so far. Kaido's having so much fun, he turns into his hybrid, where everyone finds out they're truly not ready for 2 emperors. Big Mom and Kaido then perform one of the strongest attacks in the entire series, the Ocean Sovereignty, and Zoro blocks it for like a few seconds, but it's still super impressive, one of the wildest moments in One Piece history, although most of his bones end up being shattered. Luffy is once again knocked out by Kaido.
Okay, what's wrong?
That's crazy.
That was nuts.
Law then makes a plan to separate the Emperors, which is successful as they throw Big Mom off the roof, where Kid and Killer decide to go fight her. I didn't really like this at first because I felt Kid should be fighting Kaido considering he's the one that ruined his life, but it is what it is there. Zoro then performs one of the coldest feats in One Piece history by using Ashura for the first time in almost a decade since the time skip, and permanently scars Kaido. This was insane, but also it's revealed that Zoro also has Conquerors Haki, but unfortunately for them it wasn't enough, and Kaido does a 2-for-1 combo special and takes out Law and Zoro. Luffy gets back up and learns that you can use Conqueror infused attacks, which allows you to hit someone without making contact. This makes Kaido impressed, as this is what he used to knock out Luffy the very first time. Luffy then says not to worry, he's gonna handle the rest himself and put Kaido out permanently. As this was happening, a lot of shenanigans was happening all across Onigashima. Marco was fighting King and Queen at the same time, which is pretty impressive. I wish we got more of that. But also, the Scabbards survived due to Hiyori secretly healing them, and we get one of the worst moments in Wano. Oden, who should be dead, appears in front of these idiots, and they're like, "Oh my god, you're alive? How is this possible?" Only to find out that it's Kanjo playing with them by creating an Oden clone using his ink. Ashura Doji finds this out and is killed by dynamite. He's dead, like he's actually dead. I was shocked. It was whack in my opinion, and they go off. Inuarashi then fights Jack, which is one of the worst fights in Wano as well, whatever. Things get from bad to worse as Big Mom basically ruins Nami and Usopp's fight by taking out Page 1 due to Mother Mode and Tama shenanigans. Kid comes to save them. It's ass. This whole section is ass. I don't know how you go from the rooftop to this. Oh, you what?
How do you do that? How do you do that? What the hell is going on?
Meanwhile, Momo reads Oden's journal and realizes his true destiny. We head back to the rooftop where once again, Luffy is knocked out by Kaido for the 3rd time and thrown off Onigashima. This was wild. Kaido then decides to try to end this war and look for Momonosuke, and once again, Kinemon and Kiku are shocked by Oden returning, knowing it's Kanjuro in disguise, and Kiku gets cut down like an idiot. Kinemon has some sense and finally kills Kanjuro for the 2nd time, and Kaido crashes in and hammers Kinemon in the head and even stabs him in the torso, splitting him in half. One of the craziest moments in One Piece, which is then ruined quickly as it turns out Kinemon is not dead, he's not split in half, but in fact Law supposedly didn't reattach him properly. Law, one of the smartest characters in the entire series, didn't attach Kinemon properly, and Kinemon is still alive. This was the worst moment in Wano and honestly One Piece. It was so egregious and honestly tested me and a lot of fans' patience and intelligence. Things get even nuttier because as Luffy's falling in the ocean, he somehow uses telepathy, which is, I guess, the voice of all things, and speaks to Momo and tells him he's alive and everything will be fine. And the Heart Pirates find him through the voice of all things, I guess, and Luffy is saved. Momo and Shinobu decide to jump off Onigashima and they rendezvous with Luffy down in Wano, where Luffy starts recovering due to the food Caribou brings to him. Yamato then begins to fight Kaido, where we learn he ate the dog fruit mythical motto Okuchi no Makami, a guardian deity of Wano. This fruit was not meant for Yamato, but he ate it because he was hungry. Although Yamato isn't enough to defeat Kaido, he is enough to hold him off. Meanwhile, Sanji's fighting King and Queen, which is very impressive until Marco gets back but lets the spotlight shine on the young bulls, Zoro and Sanji, who have recovered and are now fighting King and Queen. Now, for the remainder of the video, just to make things more simpler, we're gonna go through each of the individual fights until the climax of the arc. Inu defeats Jack in a nothing fight, just wasting time and space. Neko defeats Perospero to avenge Pedro, whereas Frankie and Sasaki is a very mid fight, it's okay, nothing special. We then get Jinbei versus Who's Who ate the saber-toothed devil fruit and was also considered a rival of Rob Lucci. Now this fight is very interesting due to the information we get from it. We learned that Who's Who was originally a CP9 agent that was tasked to protect the Gum Gum fruit that was being delivered to the world government until it was stolen by red-haired Shanks, and because he failed, he was thrown into prison and became a slave, where he basically wanted to end his life until he heard the story of a god named Nika, a man that will come around, bring smile and joy to everyone, and would free them. Now remember this information because it will become crucial for not just Wano, but the remainder of the series. Jinbei then defeats Who's Who pisses him off by being racist and knocks him out to no one's surprise. Even CP0 were like, oh, Who's Who is gonna fight Jinbei? That's gonna be a wash, we're good. We then finally get to my favorite Tobi Roppo fight, Black Maria versus Robin. This is the first fight Robin has gotten in decades, and man, it was a treat. She gets so many cool power-ups by using her devil fruit, by creating a giant version of herself. She learned fishman karate from Koala and Sabo, and she even gained a new form, the Demonio Fleur, where she turns into a giant devil version of herself, and she begins to break Black Maria's back. This fight was awesome and I really loved it. We then get Killer versus Hawkins. Killer is stressed because Hawkins is using his fruit to transfer the damage to Kid, but then Killer's like, you know what, I'm just gonna cut off your left arm. Why? Because Kid doesn't have a left arm, so he won't get damaged. He then takes up the voodoo doll and kills Hawkins. Hawkins actually dies. Well, not here, but he dies at the end of the arc, but he's done. Meanwhile, Luffy finally recovers and Momo asks Shinobu to use her devil fruit to age up Momonosuke into an adult form, which he does, and he turns into a giant dragon. They fly up back to Onigashima, and then they begin to fight Kaido again. It's actually a really dope moment, with even Momo declaring he's gonna become the Shogun of Wano in front of Kaido, and even bites him, with Luffy telling him that there's nothing to be afraid of. It's a really dope moment and thus continues the growth of Momonosuke. And it only gets better from here on out as we get to some of my favorite fights in not just Wano but in the entire series, starting with Sanji versus Queen. Queen has actually been keeping an eye on Sanji the entire time because he is the son of Vince Smoke Judge. The reason that's important is because Judge, Caesar Clown, Queen, and Vegapunk were all a part of a mad scientist group called MADS, and he wants Sanji to use the raid suit, which Sanji refuses because he's been feeling weird since the last time he used it. The fight is very back and forth between the two, where Queen uses his ultimate technique, the Snakeosaurus, where his literal head and spine leap out its body and strangle Sanji, crushing his entire bones. Now you would think the fight is over, but it's not, as Sanji's bone structure snaps back in place and he regenerates as the exoskeleton finally awakens in Sanji's body. He has now become the same as his other siblings. This makes Sanji freak out because he does not want to become an emotionless monster like his brothers, and he runs away, even catching a bullet to the back of his head that literally gives him 0 damage. And I forgot the best part, of course. Queen is shocked and uses his sword and fully swings on Sanji's head, where the sword breaks and Sanji just says, Ouch. This is the most radical power-up in One Piece history and gives Sanji one of the best durability in the entire series. Sanji runs away and he bumps into a girl which he thinks he hurt by accident, and he's basically losing his mind. He starts wondering, does Luffy want the weak version of Sanji that he is, or the emotionless monster like his siblings? And then he confronts Queen, where he destroys the raid suit and decides that he will win this battle through his own power, and he will not become a monster like his siblings. Yes, he shares the same blood, but that does not define who he is. It's amazing character development for Sanji. Queen then displays his technique in cybernetics as he basically copies all the powers of Sanji's siblings, as he can copy Judge's technology. He then even turns invisible, but not before Sanji basically goes invisible by going so fast he seems invisible, and he learns that Queen was the one who attacked this woman, enraging Sanji, where he unlocks a new power-up, Ifrit Jambe, which is a hotter flame than the Diablo Jambe, where the fire actually turns blue, and he then annihilates Queen, sending him off the island, and the winner is now Sanji. What a magnificent fight, I really loved it, but he gets even better, as Zoro is off fighting King, and he's having the fight of his life. He's never had a challenge like this before, back against the wall, and he's really getting his ass beat. He's not ready for this fight. Zoro gets a hit in, and he tears off a bit of King's mask, which pisses him off because no one has been ever able to see what he truly looks like because he's hiding his identity, because it's revealed he's actually a Lunarian. These guys are a special race that used to live on top of the red line, and they're able to adapt to any environment, and they have indestructible skin so long as the flame on their back is on, and when it's off they get incredibly fast. They're also able to produce lots and lots of fire. It's hinted that Sanji might share the blood of a Lunarian as well, which is why he's able to just combust into flames. Anyways, their fight goes all over Onigashima. Zoro's getting sent flying from wall to wall like he's Chris Brown. Zoro finally gets a decent hit and cuts King, and his mask falls off, where his face is finally revealed, and boy oh boy, Zoro learns he has Conquerors Haki and makes a new mode called the King of Hell mode, where he infuses his swords with Conquerors Haki. The two get into a fierce battle to determine whose ambitions are greater, which Zoro ends up victorious, as unlike King, he didn't throw away his ambition for his captain, but uses it in order for his captain to achieve his dreams, and also because Zoro is a minority hunter. We then finally get Law and Kid versus Big Back, where Law and Kid actually have awakened their devil fruit somehow, but Kid is able to turn anything he touches into magnets, where Law is able to turn anything into a room and basically do whatever his heart desires. They both try to combat Big Mom, and Law literally puts the fear of God into her by destroying her insides and bones using the Shock Willy. She is then able to regenerate her bones by making them into homies, which is actually insane. But things get even crazier as Big Mom combines her three homies and performs an attack and turns the attack into a homie, creating Mother Misery.
Combination.
But Kid and Law are able to endure it and unleash their ultimate attacks. Law does the Puncture Willy, which is one of the craziest attacks in One Piece history, by extending his sword through Big Mom, through Onigashima, through Wano until it reaches a magma chamber and does a shockwave, blowing a massive hole and destroying Big Mom's insides, where Kid follows up and does a damn punk, but none of this is still enough to take out the big one. So Law decides to use another Devil Fruit ability based off Corazones and create a room that cancels out any noise from Big Mom, and thus she's not able to call her homies. She's thrown through the hole, she grabs a frozen bomb, and it explodes, and she is falling into the hole, never to be seen again. And now we head to our main event, Luffy versus Kaido. The two of these guys are having a fierce battle on the rooftop. Kaido's having a blast, getting drunk, and surprisingly uses Future Sight, but decided not to use it the entire fight. Kaido is completely unserious, but the Gorosei decide to call CP0 and tell them to kill Luffy in fear of his Devil Fruit awakening. So they decide to do so, where Izo interrupts and is unfortunately killed, but is able to take out one of the CP0 members. Now Guernica actually ends up distracting Luffy, that makes him get knocked out once again. Kaido reminisces to the time when he fought Oden, where his fight was ruined, and he gets extremely angry, killing Nika. And people say characters don't die in One Piece. But the fight is not over as Zunisha decides to go over to Wano and basically dick ride Joy Boy, I mean Luffy, as Luffy heart restarts and he awakens his devil fruit. This is the first time the Gum Gum fruit has awakened in 800 years, and the government called this power the most ridiculous ability in the world. As when it awakens, the true nature of the Gum Gum fruit is revealed, as the Gomu Gomu no Mi actually doesn't even exist and is a fake name, as the true name of this power is the human fruit mythical model Sun God Nika, the same god that Who's Who mentioned earlier in the video. Luffy has become a god and has unlocked Gear 5, and the battle continues. This power is truly ridiculous, as it not only has the abilities of an awakened Zoan, as well as the abilities of a Paramecia, where he can turn anything into rubber, and I mean anything, the ground, people, and even lightning. This power is absolutely wild and has Kaido fluctuating. As he doesn't understand what's going on, Luffy turns into a giant and plays skipping rope with Kaido, even grabs a lightning bolt and throws it at Kaido. This ability is crazy. He is tossing Kaido around like he's a gummy worm, but Kaido is still able to keep up, surprisingly, proving that he really is the strongest in the world. But Luffy decides to end it by unleashing one of the strongest techniques in all of One Piece, the Bajrang gun, a fist bigger than Onigashima. That is also covered in armament and Conquerors Haki. This attack is insane, but Kaido unleashes his final technique, the Flaming Drum Dragon, recreates a magma form. Really quickly, back on Onigashima, there's a huge fire that gets taken out by Jinbei and Raizo. It's a really cool moment, but also Hiyori finally kills Orochi alongside Denjiro. It's a really cool moment, but honestly, it happens at the wrong time to the point no one really cares. All you really care about is Gear 5, so let's get back to it. Luffy and Kaido begin to clash, where Kaido asks Luffy what type of world are you going to create, where Luffy declares he wants to make a world where people can eat as much as they want. Kaido is defeated and launched into the magma chamber that Big Mom is in, and it explodes, and Wano has finally gotten rid of the Dragon Emperor. Luffy has won. Momo then, in his adult form, reveals himself in front of Wano and shouts out that he is now the new Shogun. It's a phenomenal moment, and honestly, what a great character design. So some weeks pass by as Zoro and Luffy are recovering from their wounds, where we get a major bombshell dropped on us via Robin and Law, who meet up with Sukiyaki, aka Tenguyama, where we learn that Wano isn't actually what we think it is, but is actually submerged underwater due to them building the walls and isolating themselves from the world. The rain got trapped and thus flooded Wano, where they had to keep building upwards, and that's why Wano looks the way it does and why the waterfall actually goes upward. And Pluton is also revealed to be in Wano as well, underneath all this water. Momo decides not to free Wano just yet, and Zunisha decides to go home, but unfortunately there is an unpaid visitor in Wano named Admiral Green Bull. This was a major shock. He takes out the commanders and the rest of the Beast Pirates easily, and he heads over to take Luffy in, which is honestly stupid considering all the people on the island. Marco, Jinbei, Zoro, Sanji, Law, Kid, Luffy, Yamato. This guy had no chance. He then washes the 9 scrubs, but is stopped as red-haired Shanks comes to promote Film Red. This guy is outside of Wano, but somehow pinpointed Green Bull's exact location and used his Conquerors Haki to scare him off. This is the greatest feat of Haki we have ever seen in this series thus far. Green Bull runs away, and where it's then revealed that Yamato decides not to join the Straw Hats, wasting all of her time. I'm kidding. She decides not to join them because she thinks Wano needs her help in order to defend it, because Green Bull is obviously a monster despite being bitched out by Shanks. He is an admiral still, he's not weak. And Shanks finally decides to go after the One Piece after all this time. It appears it might be because Luffy finally awakened his devil fruit, so Shanks might know about the true nature of Sun God Nika, and it might be needed to get the One Piece. It's then revealed that there are 2 new emperors of the sea now that Big Mom and Kaido are out, and it is Buggy the Clown and Luffy, and thus as they're leaving, they say goodbye to Momo, and Wano is finally over. And that's Wano. It's definitely a mixed bag, as it has some of the best moments in the entire series, but also some of the worst. But overall, it's a pretty wild ride, a long one, but a fun one. The issues people had with this arc was the lack of tension that you can definitely feel, as well as the fake out deaths that were happening. Also, it was clearly focusing on characters that many people did not really like or relate to, such as the Scabbards, and had way too many side characters when people just wanted to focus on the Straw Hats and even some of the worst generation. And unfortunately, the Straw Hats were never the main characters of Wano. It was always Momonosuke and the Scabbards. They were just here as tools in order for them to achieve their goals. Although it's not my favorite arc in the series, the impact it has is undeniable. From a narrative to a lore and even fighting perspective, this arc has changed everything. Otherwise, let me know in the comments what you guys thought of Wano. This video is pretty damn long, so I'm gonna peace out. Y'all have a good day and a good night. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Toodles!